I am so happy to see all of y'all. It is just such deep gratitude. And from colleagues at Warren Wilson, to friends, to my book club, our book club, and the wonderful folks at Malaprops who've been such a center of this community for so long. So I just wanted to say thank you before I would even let Liz ask a question. I was like, wait, I have to thank everybody because I just feel I'm super, super grateful. Even former Warren Wilson students who traveled from California are here. So another ODL. So what's going to happen tonight is Liz is we're going to just have a conversation about books, which is something we do in our regular life. And just for y'all who don't know, Liz was my college roommate at Vanderbilt. And so we lived together for 2 years, and we were in the same dorm complex for 1 year. And now we're lifelong friends. And so it's really a treat to get to sing and talk about books, and this book in particular, Love Your Mother, with Liz. So.
Yeah. Oh, it's great to be here, Mallory. Thank you. And again, thank you to Malaprops and to everyone who's here. So since we've known each other, I'm going to apologize in advance for my being maybe a little joking with you. Right. Okay. But also just to let y'all know that in the conversation, we'll talk a lot about friendship. And as I was getting to read some of this book, what struck me the most was the great friendship exhibited by these women in these stories, and the love that came forward, and the commitment to make the world better. And I'm grateful for Mallory for going out and researching and bringing these stories and telling them in her book. As she mentioned, this is her 5th book, and all of them have had this wonderful theme of environmental stewardship. But even more than that, Mallory, I feel like it also has to do with sort of your deep roots in how you grew up from Alabama, Southern Alabama, your family, and your faith. And also your commitment to sort of bringing forward stories. Like as a teacher and a writer, you have a lot to say to all of us. So I wanted to start out with just a question to you, and we can get to some songs later.
It's really why I'm here.
But I was thinking, could you just tell us a little bit about what led you to start writing this book, your inspiration, and sort of what sort of formed this idea initially?
Well, it's funny because the publisher, Broadleaf Books, when I got the contract to write our last best act, they said, well, we actually would like you to write 2 books. And so the book I had written several years ago, I hadn't found a publisher for. And so I just said yes. And then I was like, oh, I got to figure out what I'm going to write about. And so I had to pitch them with some ideas. And I was actually talking with one of my good friends, Jill Triswicki, who used to work at Warren Wilson years ago. Julie knows, several of us know Jill. And she works for Jesuit Refugee Services in Rome. And she works at the front lines of the climate crisis. And she's primarily working with women and girls. Specifically, she's the one that educated me about the fact that 80% of people who are displaced by the climate crisis in general are women and girls. And she works in providing access to education for women and girls who are in refugee camps. And so she was like, wait, you need to write about women and girls. And what really struck me as a mom and a teacher was that she said, so often women are doing the logistics of life, and we don't have that time to really reflect on what is the impact of our actions. I mean, for me, I'm really, honest to goodness, spend more time thinking about, oh gosh, what's for dinner than like, oh my gosh, there's a climate emergency. And so for me, the question was like, how do we hold both of those? No matter what our gender identity is, how do we hold the fact that we know there's this emergency and the logistics of our friends, our family, we have to tend to those as well, no matter who we are, or friends in our lives. So that was kind of the impetus of the book, was let's explore women. And I wanted to focus on the US because we're the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in the country. And I wanted to show my students, here are examples of people who are making a difference, and specifically women.
That's great.
Yeah.
Will you read that introduction part that includes Jill?
Yeah.
This is lovely.
I love it. I should have had Jill. I'll send her the recording.
We're getting old.
2 years ago, I don't think I had these.
We graduated in 1988.
I can hold a mic and hold the book at the same time, I think.
Hold on while we find the page.
Oh, look, I put a Post-it note there.
She came prepared with Post-it notes.
I just forgot.
Go, girl.
I don't think I've heard you do that accent before. Have y'all ever had Liz leave a voicemail? It's generally in some other vernacular. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs that are from the introduction, and it does get at that question of why did I write this book. And the subtitle is Love Above All, which is kind of, for me, the kind of theme of this book. Story time, are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Okay. It was below freezing on a bitter winter morning when my friend Jill and I bundled up our young daughters, ranging in age from 4 to 11, in puffy coats and warm hats, and drove an hour away to protest the proposed construction of a new coal-fired power plant in Western North Carolina. We packed the requisite PB&Js and water for the 3 kids, dark coffee and insulated mugs for ourselves. When we arrived at the site, our girls stared longingly at the counter-protesters, who'd harnessed more resources than our ragtag group. Why did they get Chick-fil-A? My 5th grader asked, and I think they have hot chocolate too. Go grab a sign, I said, dodging her question. Take your sister and Asia with you. Our daughters soon joined, the 20 or so adults chanting, no more coal, no more coal. I remember wondering at the time if the revolution should require better snacks. It must have been 2009 or 2010 when we took our children to prayer vigils and marches before they had a stake in their weekend plans. But that morning, as we huddled together for warmth, Jill turned to me with a grin, pointing toward the younger girls. Do you hear what I hear? I stepped closer to listen to them. 2 high-pitched preschool cheerleaders. No more cold, no more cold. It was bitter cold. They weren't aiming for irony. They were just reading the vibe of the day. All we could do at the time was double over in laughter at our good intentions, at the levity of children, the power of persistence, even when we didn't know how the story would end. We were showing up the only way we knew how, the stressed out mothers, good-hearted educators, and glass half full community members, sharing our fear for the future, but also our delight in the day. I couldn't raise my children, now 23, actually 24 tomorrow, and 16 in a climate crisis without the women I hold close to my heart. My treasure chest is these friendships, as well as the long distance mentors whose work I read and Instagram posts I follow, although they do not know my name.
Thank you. So tell me a little bit and share with the group, if you would, about your process for selecting one person from each state to tell their story. That was, I'm sure, difficult.
Well, the difficult thing for me was actually, this is why you need creative friends. So I was like, okay, I want to write about women. 25 seems too little, 100 seems too many. I had a very tight deadline. So 50 sounds good. And I was like, how am I going to organize this? And I knew I wanted to focus on the US. So it took Jill to say, how about one per state? And as
Hey,
soon as,
Joe.
yeah.
This could have been a really long book.
I know. That's so true. So, I mean, something that was so obvious, I mean, this just happens to me all the time. Something so obvious, I need somebody else in my life to just kind of lift it up for me. Maybe I would have gotten there. But when she said that, it was so obvious. And, I grew up in Alabama. I live in North Carolina. We were both in the Peace Corps at different times, different countries. But I know what it's like to be from a place that people have assumptions about. And I didn't go to college at home. I went, to another state where people were from all over. And so I wanted to share, particularly for my students from all over the country. Okay, you're from Iowa. I want to share with you somebody from Iowa who's doing this work. And I'm going to get to your question. I haven't forgotten it.
That's right. I've known you for a long time. I'll just sit here. She'll get around to it.
So I also wanted to, so it was going to be, one from each state. I wanted diversity of vocations. So, I knew I wanted poets. I wanted artists. I wanted community organizers. I wanted farmers. So what I did was I sent out, kind of a call for help to folks who are in the midst of the climate movement. Because I'm not a climate scientist. I don't consider myself, on the edge of climate activism, but I do know a lot of people in those circles. So they sent me back a long list of suggestions. And so the book includes some of these like big names in the climate movement. Texas is Catherine Hayhoe, who many of you may have heard of. But I really wanted to have people who weren't known well beyond their communities. So it was kind of with snowball sampling. This is not a representative sample. Half the women in the book are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That's certainly not representative of the demographics of the US, but I wanted to show leaders who are most impacted by the climate crisis. And so that was, I didn't have a number that I was going for, but that's how it unfolded.
Interesting. So was there any kind of common thread that you found as you talked to all these women?
Well, yes, there definitely was. And, it was a tight timeline. And so for me, I'm like very goal oriented. If there's an external goal, like I'm very motivated by that. If there's not, I'm not as motivated. So I had like this list of the states, it's like, okay, those of you who know Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, how do you get something done? Write about it bird by bird, and just start. And so, so I wasn't when I started, I was so focused on finding the women, doing the interviews, that at the time I wasn't looking for, universal themes. But what ended up happening, what became the universal theme was what you talked about, was this relationships. So this was during COVID that I was, doing this research. And so I would, okay, I have to interview, the person from Iowa or Idaho, wherever it was. And then we'd end up, like, we talk about the climate movement and their work, and we'd end up talking about our lives. The person, a physician from Iowa, Suzanne Hackenmiller, who's written books about forest bathing, but in recreational pursuits. So like, how do you do forest bathing, basically meditation in nature while you're kayaking or running? And I remember telling Christine, who's one of my running partners, like, I never thought about actually trying to relax, like, while I'm running. I'm just like, so glad I'm out the door. And so this connection, and to me, it's maybe obvious, but that became the theme of the book, is that our relationships with each other, our work in collective, is how we're going to shift our world and our communities in a climate crisis, working together. None of these women were working by themselves. They were damn good, though, at working together. So
you had shared when we were speaking earlier about the fact that you started these conversations as an assignment to yourself, but you ended up walking away with a lot of friendships. Yeah. That's lovely. So because we're here at Malaprops in Asheville in North Carolina, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your woman from North Carolina.
Yes. Well, and before I do,
Go ahead.
just an aside, as a teacher, it's hard I don't remember things really well. Like I like little tricks to remember things because I don't have this super great memory. And so, one of the things I've been sharing with people and in conversations about the book, in answer to the question of what did you find, like what did these women share?
Yeah.
And it's three things, and they all start with a C, so I can remember them. But it really was true that all these women, they were good at talking about the climate, so communication, and then they were good at working together, so the collaboration, and then they really focused on community. So those three things, it was consistent across the stories. And so that's helpful to me to remember and to talk to students about. The
Great
3
mnemonic.
C's.
Yes, that's good.
Is it a mnemonic if it's just alliteration?
I don't know.
Really?
I think so. Any tool
Okay.
that works, right?
Okay.
Well, so go back to North Carolina.
Oh, yeah, right,
'cause
thanks.
we're-
Yeah. Liz in college, like I would study for hours for a test, just a little aside. And Liz is very sharp. And Liz could be out all night and then wake up and take the test and do great.
Mallory, I think my mom's watching.
I gotta put on my glasses first. You can hold the crowd.
Okay, put on your glasses. We're gonna read a selection from North Carolina.
You didn't test this out with me beforehand. Okay. I think that's the point though, right? We're not scripted. So I want to ask just first before I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs from the North Carolina person. And I want to just ask though, how many people know Dana Ruggiero? Does anybody here know Dana? Okay. So this is an example of somebody who, has become such a friend. And I was friends with Dana before this book, but she's one of those women that lifts other people up. She's a documentary filmmaker, has worked all over the world. And yet years ago, when I've told her about projects I'm doing, she's, I feel like I'm the most important person when she's talking to me. That's amazing to me. So that type of person makes for a really good documentary filmmaker because they actually are really good listeners. So here's the first, just 2 paragraphs from Dana's story. Dana Ruggiero was riding shotgun. She listened with her whole body, deep brown eyes facing the driver, her head of long brown curls nodding with compassion. I wondered if she even saw the rural North Carolina road in front of her and the tall pine trees on either side. A mother named Tracy steered the car and shared how she had joined with other moms and neighbors, black and white together, in Stokes County, North Carolina, to fight proposed fracking and the harmful effects of coal ash ponds. A handicap parking tag hung from the rearview mirror of Tracy's car. She pulled the vehicle to the side of the road to show Dana how the coal industry buried coal ash underwater. What looked like a peaceful pond in a rural area was actually a death trap. Next, Tracy showed Dana the location for a test drill for fracking. My mom was trying to figure out why everybody was getting sick, Tracy said. That's how it all began. At age 44, Tracy suffered 3 strokes and a heart attack. It turned out that the water in this predominantly Black community was contaminated by heavy metals from coal ash. Zoom. So Dana's vocation is listening and then telling these stories in films. And she's gone all over the country documenting stories, particularly for a group called Moms Clean Air Force. And so, her work it just blows me over because when she is listening to people, it's like she's all there. You forget that she's actually making a movie. And she started she lived in Asheville, well, outside of Asheville, in Franklin, North Carolina. And she started an organization called the Climate Listening Project before anybody was really listening to climate stories. And she started documenting stories and then got funding. And just, it's amazing to just see they're short little films, but to see the stories that she captures. And really more compelling to me than just the stories is the trust that the people who are telling their stories feel with her. So Climate Listening Project on, if you're on social media, it's great to follow.
Thank you. Being from North Carolina, I had a great sense of pride reading her story. Not that I had any reason to feel that way, but there's something about recognizing the fact that each state has a story and millions of stories of people doing their part in different ways. And I love that she hit that communication C in a way that was very deep, and connected to other people. Remind me real quick, what were the other two C's?
Call and response, like a song.
I think that's my hint. Is that a hint? Okay, so we're supposed to turn these off. Can we break for a song? Is that what you were saying?
I can repeat the 3 C's though, if you'd like.
Please do.
Okay. Communication, collaboration,
Community.
Hannah and my student is in the back. We'll talk about this tomorrow, right?
All right, I'm gonna do a shorter song.
Okay.
Okay, we need to turn that off.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you. Liz.
So listening to you speak, I wanted to play this song because it's a lot about motherhood. My favorite way to eat a peach is standing at my sink, looking out at my back door, just thinking what I think. Thoughts of summer afternoons, the goodness of old friends. I'm a little nervous.
Can't tell.
Can I start again?
Yeah, but I can't tell.
Okay, thank you. My favorite way to eat a peach is standing at my sink, looking out at my back door, just thinking what I think. Thoughts of summer afternoons, the goodness of old friends. I bite into that sweetness, let it roll on down my chin, and I say a little prayer of thanks to standing at my sink. My favorite way to take a nap is with a baby on my chest, sun underneath myself. So wait a minute, I've got to tell you something.
It's not just me.
No, because you just did a big event last night, right?
Yeah.
What I'm discovering is sometimes it's harder to communicate when you're surrounded by people that you love.
Yeah. Oh my
There's
gosh.
so many familiar faces, right? I don't think I've played this song for you.
I feel like I've heard it though. So, if we're being completely honest.
Right. Well, I want to do this well for all the moms out there.
Do you see that? A tissue?
Huh?
A
No.
tissue?
What?
A tissue?
My favorite. My favorite way to take a nap is with a baby on my chest,
On the porch with a big old swing, I tell you, it's the best. The rhythm and the stillness, the promises I'll keep. I breathe in that baby smell and fall right to sleep. And I say a little prayer of thanks for the baby on my chest. Now my favorite way to pass the night is playing this guitar. Just me and the dog, the moon and the stars. The crickets in their compliment, the wind in the trees. I'm happy just to play along with songs such as these. And I sing a little prayer of thanks just playing this guitar. Now my favorite way to take a walk is with you by my side. Sand underneath our feet and the rising of the tide. Sound of the water, the ebb and the flow. And knowing that you come with me anywhere I go. And I say a little prayer of thanks just playing this guitar. Now my life is full of simple things, but there's wisdom I can give. Take time to appreciate the life that you live. Taste of the sweetness and listen to the earth. And love on those close to you for all that you're worth. And say a little prayer of thanks in those simple things. Say a little prayer of thanks, those wondrous simple things.
Oh my gosh, that was good. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Mallory. It's true. I love that. Well, okay, let's get back to the teacher.
Oh, let's take a moment. I mean, these are original freaking songs, y'all. I mean, give it up. We did learn to play the guitar about the same time for a Shakespeare class.
We did.
And I played the song for the Shakespeare final, and then I stopped. And then you
Yeah, we did a joint Shakespeare project with songwriting. Yeah.
we won't play that song.
No.
Although we could. I mean, we're not going to, but we know the words.
All right. So I'm going to move ahead because I want to leave time for questions.
And more songs. No, name songs.
Okay. So I do want to talk to you a little bit more about your process. And think about what you learned as you went through this. Were there some things that stood out for you personally or touched you particularly in the last, doing this project?
My student Hannah is going to laugh at this, but this is not a very deep answer, but it's the one truth is that I really learned how valuable index cards are as organizers of your research and your life. And that sounds like really silly, but that is in terms of process. Like I have a big plastic, you didn't ask about this, but process.
Yeah.
I have a big plastic bin for both books and I divide it into categories like dividers. And I read somewhere that Elizabeth Gilbert used index cards to write all her books. And so I was like, well, if she can do it, I can too. And so it's not a very high-tech process at all, but that is actually, you know, I learned that this is one thing that I learned is that even at an older age, we're 57, that you can learn new strategies for organizing and they don't necessarily have to be high-tech ones. And so that's like something really practical that I learned. And I think I also learned how to stalk people on the internet. I'm serious.
They call that preliminary research.
Yeah. Well, all of these people I didn't actually have a personal contact with. I mean, some of them I did, but there are a lot of people that I was like, I want to talk to them. And I had to, I mean, it was kind of embarrassing, but I mean, the internet is, I mean, social media is social. And so I often approach people like on direct, you know, DM or comments on Instagram. And a lot of people, you know, didn't respond, but you'd be surprised. People, I mean, I was legit. I wasn't acting like I was weird, but.
Well, did you find people were receptive to your inquiries?
I mean,
Or
probably
did you
half
have
and
to
half.
bug them a little bit?
Probably about half and half, yeah. But I was surprised how many well-known people actually respond. And I you know, if you're commenting on their posts and I mean, I spend a lot of time on social media as just for people that I admire. And so if you're active commenting on what they're doing, they're more receptive to, yeah. And there were also a few people who were so well-known that I only used secondary research for Amanda Gorman. I knew I wanted to write about Amanda Gorman as a poet. And I was like, if Amanda Gorman's PR people don't talk to me, I don't care, I'm writing about. And there was enough secondary research out there to craft a story about her.
Tell us about Amanda Gorman and yeah.
Well, I'm gonna make sure we have room for more songs.
No, we all want to hear
Okay,
about Amanda
all right.
Gorman.
So so we yeah, I did not actually speak to Amanda Gorman, but she wrote a poem that's not as well known as her, you know, inaugural poem, but she wrote a poem about climate change called Earthrise. And I had gone to a training with Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. And so I had played that, you know, a video of the poem to my students. And this was 2 years ago, I guess. And it was funny because a student that I would never have thought was somebody who would like try to write poetry because of just the assumptions I had. Real athlete, like, you know, kind of, I don't know. I just didn't think about this. I didn't think anybody was going to write poetry from just showing a video. I was just trying to show a video of Amanda Gorman. And the student wrote me that night and said, it feels awkward to write this to you, but I was so moved by that poem. And I went out into the night and there was, you know, a moon and stars and I wrote this poem. I recorded it on my phone and I want to share it with you. And I was like, I started crying, which is hard to believe, but I did. And, you know, it was just like one of those things, like you just don't know. A small 10-minute little clip, and it had moved him. And so I wrote about that. I wanted to tell that story. You know, I wanted to write about Amanda Gorman, but really I wanted to tell that story. And of course I got the students' permission. And so that kind of rounded out. Every story is not just it's third person in terms of telling their story, the women's story, but I don't know how to write without injecting myself into the story a little bit. And so every story has a little bit of me in it.
Right. Well, every story has a listener.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And what is interesting about all of this book is that each chapter and each story and each woman has created a way to amplify or address some issue. And then here you are writing a book and you're amplifying it further. Mm-hmm. And your point about the internet is kind of interesting because if there are these stories that people want to learn more about, they can follow up with each chapter and find out about a project or get more involved in another way.
Yeah, no, there at the end, there is a list of all the organizations that were mentioned in any of the stories. You know, and as well as 50 ways to love your mother. I thought that was cute.
That was cute.
So one action step from each story. So this reminds me of the song.
Oh, okay. And then we have to do questions.
Yeah, but
Okay.
let's play,
Right.
let's do another song. We've only done one.
That's okay. There's a lot to say. You're doing great. And Patricia will just do this and then we can open it up for questions. Is that about right? Okay. Thank you.
Or maybe one more. Yeah. No, I'm not being silly though. A lot of people can't play too.
I'm gonna do it this way. This was a special request. What's that you say? Look at that dress, your shoes untied, your hair's a mess. I don't know, but I could guess you do what your mama said. Famous folks with no good sense, generals and presidents, they tell you part of their success is to do what your mama says. The best that you are able. Don't waste other people's time. Keep those elbows off the table. Stay away from cheap red wine. Well, Homer, good King John, Cleopatra, Genghis Khan, they knew how to get it on. Don't you hear what your mama say? Jones and Joe DiMaggio, Elvis Presley, Picasso. If you'd ask them, they'd tell you so. Do what your mama says. Don't let stains set in sweaters. Teach your children how to swim. Life will always get better after you take one on the chin. Well, stitching time, it says 9, so do your work and don't you whine. Eat a peach and go to bed on time. Do what your mama says. Don't waste love or good pecans. Overeat or overtend. Recycle all those empty cans. Do what your mama says. Always tip the waiter 20%. Keep some money in your pants. Don't say thank you notes for later. Learn how to dance. Well, stitching time, it saves 9, so do your work and don't you whine. Eat a peach and go to bed on time. Do what your mama says. Take this advice, you'll be amazed. It'll get you through the toughest days. Help you in many other ways. Do what your mama says. That's right now. Do what your mama says. Everybody. Do what your mama says. Are you listening to me? Do what your mama says. Do what your mama says.
Hey, I'd like to do a couple of questions. We'd love to sneak in one more song, Liz, and I'll just gonna take over. I'm staging a coup.
Please.
And I want us to have another song in there. If we could, please. And you know, I have a special one that I
Oh.
love, and I think that the audience will back me up on this. Carry My Love. Audience.
Yeah.
Do that now?
What do you think?
Let's take some questions.
Yeah,
now.
don't
Do
you
some
want-
questions, do a little mix of it. We'll mix
All
it
right.
up, do some questions, and then get a little musical interlude.
Do you want to be here?
I can stand back here at audience.
Well-
I don't have anything yet from the virtual audience. So virtual audience, bring it on. You can email us virtualqa@malaprops.com, or you can log into YouTube and post a question in the chat. If we've got some in the audience here, then just a reminder to please repeat the question.
Okay, I think we have somebody over here.
Yeah, hi. I may have misheard, but what is snowball sampling?
Did you get that? What the question is, what is snowball sampling?
I was loosely using the phrase in social science research. Sometimes people talk about getting one respondent or one interviewer, and then they interviewee, and then that leads you to the next. And I was using that loosely. That's a great question, though. So much like a snowball accumulates.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful book and wonderful tonight. My question is, did you approach each person with the same kinds of questions? And did you give them sort of a presentation to them about what you wanted to do, so you directed it?
So the question from Liz Colton was, did I ask the same questions of all the women that I interviewed and kind of direct the story in that way? Is that, yeah. Well, I knew I couldn't really start the research before having a framework. For me, I don't discover structure from doing. I find the structure and then I do it. And so I knew I was gonna. And is somebody saying that's the opposite? Yeah, I know. I mean, it's there's no one right way, right? So, but I knew going into the interviews, I had to have some sense of what the layout of the story was going to be, not in terms of the content, but in terms of the organization. And so I knew every story starts in the middle, like with the person is in the middle of their life doing their thing. And then it goes to a little bit of background and then kind of what's next. So I had that layout, but the questions differ depending on what the work was that they were doing. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
My question is, was there any time during the writing process that you had a lack of motivation?
So the question is a great one. Was there any time in the writing process that I had a lack of motivation? Sure. I mean, it's really, I'm actually not joking, you know. But I think, you know, for me, the deadline was so tight, and that I didn't. It's almost like the analogy that I'll use is it's almost like in the climate crisis. If we're really paying attention, we don't have time for despair.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have time to get lack of motivation. I had it for sure, but I wouldn't have met my deadline. So, and that's a powerful motivator for me.
Yeah.
I think maybe like, you know, I would have like, oh God, my writing sucks. You know, that kind of thing. But, you know, that's solved by getting other people who are better than you to read your stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? And then, so I dealt with it that way in treats. Like,
Well, quick follow-up.
Treats.
Did you put stories down and then come back to them? Did you write it in snippets on your note cards?
yeah, so that's a good question. Are you allowed to ask a question?
Oh, well, it's a follow-up. But there is another question over here. She didn't want to answer that question.
No, it's a good question. I just,
We
go
can
ahead.
answer
No,
it.
we're good. Go ahead.
So I maybe this is too early to ask Mallory, but a plan for a volume 2 to follow up with these women down the road, maybe in 10 years to see
that's
what
great.
progress is happening.
What a great idea.
So the question was, is there a plan to follow up with these women in 10 years? I'll be 67. To see what has happened. That's a great idea. I think I haven't had that idea yet. No, I do. So this is my colleague. This is my colleague, Eric, who teaches forestry at Warren Wilson. And no, that's a great idea. I think what the idea I have had that I've talked about with the editor is the idea of doing like a YA or a middle school grade version of this.
Yeah.
It's written so that it's not like a complicated book. So, you know, I've had teens reading it in my family, for example, but I'd like to pitch it to a little bit younger audience and maybe with illustrations. So this publisher has an imprint that does children's books, and they actually invest in the illustrations. So I think that would be fun. I'm manifesting that here just by saying it. Yeah.
How did you find a woman in that southern nation, Texas?
Well, Texas, the question was, how did I find somebody in Texas? Yeah. And as when I mentioned the person who was from Texas, Catherine Hayhoe, she's so well known that, and there's so many other people who are doing climate work in Texas. But I wanted to cast a light on Catherine Hayhoe, who is one of the leaders in this country in climate communication and climate science, mainly because she'd been really influential to me. She contributed a chapter in a edited book. Well, I edited the book. It was an anthology about faith and climate change. And she's an evangelical and a climate scientist. And she had edited a book and as a chapter for me. And when I didn't have to do many edits on her chapter. She's such a good writer. She's done, multiple books. But I remember I was in my garden, this was years ago, and I had younger kids. And she's so well known, but she was like, oh, damn, I just spilled wine on my computer. And I was like, you're so real. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I tell that story to you. I mean, I don't think I've told that to anybody, but it's like somebody who can be so prominent and such an accomplished scientist and communicator, and then just connect to me, random person. I really, in North Carolina, as another mom, as a community member, I just was like, I'm writing about Catherine because I wanted to tell her story.
And so many heroes in each state.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So I'm recently taking a class at Ollie on climate change.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, our teacher at the end of today sent me the fact that you're going to be speaking.
Oh.
And so that's why I'm here. But, we're looking at a lot of data, and it's only a 4-week class. Today, we had the job of sort of looking at all the issues and coming up with our solutions. And it's a little bit overwhelming, and of course, we hear a lot of times that it's too late, that we've already sort of missed that time. And so I'm just curious, and actually one of the main pieces about taking the class is communication, first C. And that's what you're doing. You're communicating stories to get it out there so that people really understand, because most people don't really know the severity of what's going on. And I'm curious just to know from your point of view after doing the book, is how you feel. Are you optimistic in finding a solution? And the people that you're interviewing, are they generally optimistic or are they pessimistic as to it being too late or that there's still hope?
So the question was, after taking a class at Ollie, the Adult Lifelong Learning Center at UNCA, and looking at a lot of data, it's so overwhelming. And so the question is, am I optimistic or not? Were the women optimistic or not? Tell me your name. Todd, yeah. So last night I spoke with at an event for United Way. There were about 90 people, adults, mostly women, and I brought with me 2 of my students, one student and one recent graduate. And I asked them, what would you say to us older people? And they both of them said, we grew up hearing that the world is ending. And of course, they're studied environmental studies. So that's, a select demographic. But they said, we have heard that things are ending, and we don't want to give up. And the reality, I did an interview today for somebody who was doing a publication about the rural US. And the question was like, what about, areas where you can't really say climate crisis, without, people getting upset. And one of the women in the book, her research really looks at how do we connect with people whose identities align with ours, and those identities are not political. It turns out like Republican and Democrat are actually not the most salient markers or identifiers, but things like, are we people of faith? Are we parents? Are we recreationists? Are we anglers? That connecting on those shared values is how we gain traction for forward momentum. So to answer your question, to me, this is a story based on love. The solutions exist and the love story isn't over yet, but it takes us all engaging and collective in the way that we can.
And you feel confident that we can achieve that before we blow it?
I'm just like a person. Confidence isn't something to me. I'm going to get Cecil's.
Well, it's maybe hope is a better word.
Yeah. And I don't even think hope. Hope gets thrown around a lot, right? To me, I think, do the next right thing. It's like
we all have a part to play.
Yeah, and like personally, like there's a lot written. Like, do you have hope? Do you not have hope? And I'm not. It's a good question, but I think I think we don't. The conversation is maybe hopeless for people who actually their daily lives are impacted by the climate crisis. So it's up to us to engage how we can. And there's not a crystal ball, but to me, and this is where it comes back to faith. And then I will take Cecil's question. My faith tells me that I need to do the right thing no matter how the story is going to end. And that doesn't mean all people of faith are like, I'm just saying that's what guides me.
Thank you.
Yeah. I got kind of like passionate about that. Hey, ask me about hope again.
Mallory, I've known you for 2 decades anyway, I think, something like that. And yet today's Washington Post, I learned something about you that I had missed along the way, which was your work on green burial. And my question is, I put my dad's ashes and my brother's ashes in a lake in Florida. I put my mother's ashes in Reed Creek because she loved the Gulf of Mexico, and I figured Reed Creek to the French Broad to the Tennessee to the
It would get there eventually.
and then the other piece of this is your main theme is we need to tell better stories. What's your better story about what we should do with ourselves when we go?
Well, and this is Cecil Bothwell, who longtime journalist, and we have known each other a long time. And Cecil's question is really related to my previous book, Our Last Best Act, that explores my 1-year journey to look at sustainable options for our bodies after we die. And, the book is available for sale tonight. What? No, yeah, Stephanie's waving. I think the question isn't one that's just answered, in a sentence, but my answer is that I did answer it in the book for myself. There are a lot more sustainable options for disposition of our bodies than what I thought about before I started the research. In fact, aquamation is now available in Asheville, just as of very, very recently. So there's options from green burial to aquamation, to human composting, to the body farm. So, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, I want to just pick up on something because I want to make sure this part of Cecil's question gets answered, which is, what's the better story? And it ties into hope. And all of these stories, to me, when we look at these people in their situation, it would have been easy to be hopeless. It would have been easy to say, this isn't my job. I'm just one little person. What I do doesn't matter. And I think what the stories say and what they tell us and how you amplify it is that it does matter. Each of us in our little way can do what is right, can make our own decisions, can love our children, can love our neighbors, can connect with them, no matter who they are, at some basic level. and build that community, which is the third C, right?
That's true.
Yeah,
And pressuring elected officials is part of that third C too.
but you
Or
know,
running for office.
yeah, but that's just part of the story.
Yeah.
I think this has to move beyond politics in many ways.
So
That's certainly part of the puzzle, but not the only one.
we're at the top now, but that doesn't mean we couldn't wrap up with a final question and a take us out song.
Okay.
Right.
Is-
So what are you gonna do next? Do we finally get you back as a friend and?
Are you saying this is Liz's husband? Or, I mean, I don't want to like do there are stand-up comics who are doing like climate comedy. I mean, so I feel like we actually have a gig going. But I'm not making light of. So are you saying I've been a bad friend?
No. We're saying in your data and your research, we missed you. Because it did take a great amount of work.
Oh.
And you are a full-time mother and a full-time professor. And now you're doing book tours. And this is your 5th book. And
I was just kidding.
well, I'm not. I'm proud to know you, but I hope you take some time to relax.
So I hear that. I'm gonna do not just what my mama says, I'm gonna do what Liz says.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more song.
Should we
Final
do?
song?
So I have, whenever anyone requests a song, I feel like I've got to play it because if someone's going to request it,
And Patricia remembered the song,
I did.
thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
but that means I have to stand up.
Yeah. So,
Some people haven't
this
seen it.
actually speaks to how we ended. When I wrote this song, I wrote it really for my daughter who was talking to me about a bullying situation. But like all processes, right? I felt like I was talking to her and God was talking to me, And I also felt like this song kind of went past that one little situation. And I feel like there is a better end to this story and we can create it. And I think it's important to lift the people who are working up and to lift each other up, particularly our young people. And I look forward to your next book because I know for a fact there's some young heroes out there.
Well, yeah, and just in the book, there are also young people are highlighted in the book too. So suing the government. Yeah, I think actually.
And we're proud of them too, because they're also from this area. Yeah. So this song is called You Carry My Love. I appreciate the request. It has hand signals. If you've ever been to summer camp or church camp, Mallory actually invented these hand signals. And anytime I play, I invite people to follow Mallory. Y'all can stand up and move around. If you know the hand signals, come on up here and share in the magical online experience for these kids. Right.
Silly girls with their petty jealousies and little lies, they try to tear you down. They act your friend, talk behind your back and give you alibis to impress someone else around. But you know better make you feel. You deserve better, so go find something real. Look at you now, 'cause you got me and you carry my love everywhere you go. You carry my love with you. You carry my love everywhere you go. You carry my love with you. Silly boys with their posturing, their egos, and their game. They're scared of who you are. They kiss all over and act as if they showered you with rain. But they won't be battle scars. And you are deeper the damage they made you. You deserve better, so go find something true. Pick yourself up and just move on, girl, and you carry my love. Come on, y'all. Everywhere you go, you carry my love with you. You carry my love everywhere you go. You carry my love with you. So when you feel afraid, when you reach the end of your road, when you learn that you've been played, you still follow higher rules. Don't you give up hope. Darkest hour, the longest hour. Search your heart and you'll find me there. In the noise and the chaos, I'll be your lullaby. When you're tired, I'll be your rocking chair. So keep on keeping on, and you will find a way. You're stronger than strong, and tomorrow's a new day. Look to yourself and see you're beautiful, so beautiful, only beautiful, and you carry my love everywhere you go. You carry my love with you. You carry my love everywhere you go. You carry my love with you. Thank you. You guys are wonderful. Thank you, Mallory.